Shannon Simpson's debut young adult novel, Spellbound, won a prestigious contest, catapulting her into the literary spotlight as an award winning author. And today we share her story. Authors like you've never heard them before, only on Books with Bridgetti. Don't go away, we will be right back.
Introducing Books with Bridgetti, a lineup of industry experts, award-winning authors and talented indie authors. Buckle up for an unparalleled journey with us. Meet exceptional authors celebrated globally for their captivating narratives. Our authors craft imaginative stories that stay etched in your mind long after the final page. It's not just stories, it's lingering experiences that stay etched in your mind. Our authors share the inspirations that create mesmerizing page-turning stories. Journeys that embody resilience, that turn setbacks into stepping stones, rejections that spark growth, and hurdles that become a catalyst for creativity. From dramas, mysteries, fantasies, children's stories to reality stories, join us as we delve into the inspiration behind the story, discover how authors breathe life into characters, and meticulously craft plots that keep you turning the page. But wait, there's more. We share stories from indie authors as well as Amazon and New York Times best-selling authors. Get ready for an interview that'll have you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned. Join us only on Books with Bridgetti.
If you're just joining us, then welcome to Books with Bridgetti. Our stream today is made possible by StreamYard and Be Live Media. And in today's show, we're going to be talking to Shannon Simpson. Now, if you've never ever met her before, Shannon is from what she calls a sleepy town, her journey goes from the enchanting realms of supernatural fiction. And this began when she wrote a book at the age of just 13 years old. And she says that inspired by her first Harlequin Romance novel, she transitioned from childhood fantasies to captivating narratives filled with forbidden love and supernatural intrigue. Now, this is exactly how her story began. In 2017, her debut young adult novel, Spellbound, won a prestigious contest, and that catapulted her into the literary spotlight of winning an award. And so she's now known as an award-winning author. From humble beginnings, cleaning her aunt's Victorian home surrounded by books, so that was her life, her path embodies the transformation of passion and perseverance. And so let's welcome her to the show. Shannon, welcome to Books with Bridgetti. I am so pleased to have you join me on the show today. A hearty, warm welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Big pleasure. So your readers, I was reading through all the reviews that you had of Spellbound, and everyone raves about the book. What is your secret ingredient for creating captivating stories?
I'd say most likely it's my ability to put myself in the story. If I am writing it and something doesn't flow right, then I usually take that out and go back. I've literally done a whole book that way. I wrote it, but I felt like a pressure to write it the way it was. And then after I read over to edit it, I didn't like it. So I just started over. I had to put myself in that specific, as the main character in that specific book. And then I loved what I wrote after that. It was like the words just poured out of me instead of being forced.
Wow, that is amazing. I've interviewed hundreds of authors, and I think the editing process is often something that authors dread the most.
Mm-hmm.
So it's incredible that you saying you almost started from scratch and you loved what you wrote the second time a lot more than you wrote the first time. And I think that's kind of a huge nugget
Mhm.
for authors, and especially new authors. And I mean, that really stands out for me, because that's not something I expect to hear from somebody when they're writing their first novel. That's probably why it was so um, captivating and amazing. And you've managed to weave very complex elements like witches, vampires, ghosts seamlessly into the narrative. How do you approach incorporating all these different elements into your storytelling?
Well, my first goal with this one was I wanted to give witches a different outlook. Normally, they're bad characters, or they're like Glinda the Witch and the Wizard of Oz and overly good. I wanted to have something that was different. So I made my witches age every 1 year as a human, or every 1 year as a witch is 10 years as a human. So even though they look like they're two, they're actually 20 years old. So at the end of it, I decided, and it was so complicated and I could hardly keep up myself, but I decided to make it so that on the outside, to the human world, they would look like they were going to be 50 years old upon their death, when in actuality, as a witch, they had lived 500 years. And then I thought that was something different to do. I never meant to bring in vampires and ghosts. It was supposed to be just about witches. But as soon as I started writing, the characters just showed me that they were going to do what they wanted to do. And in the end, in book 2 even, I never even dreamed about writing about gargoyles. And now I've got a main character in the books that's a gargoyle. And my thing is I want to make them, I don't want them to be the same thing. They fly on a broom, they have warts or whatever. Even with the familiars that the witches have, I didn't want a black cat. I had a black dog. In the second book with another witch, it's a white unicorn with a rainbow mane horn, but a small miniature unicorn. And so as they're going through, I wanted all of it to be different. I didn't want it to be the normal stuff. Even with the vampires, I wanted them to be a little more standoffish, not scary, because I don't want to have a scary book out there. I want this to be something that teenagers will enjoy. And so my goal was to try and make it entertaining that teenagers would enjoy, as well as adults, but not be the same repetitive instincts on everything. So even I took some of the myths that were vampire related and I made them witch related instead. Like, you can't see their reflection in a mirror. I chose to use that as a way of doing things with my witches. And then if you take a photo of them, they lose their powers. So each little thing, as I was writing, it was, I got to where I was going, okay, I like this. No, I don't like that. Let's take that out. And then I'd go back to fix something. Because when I edit, and then I come back and read again and edit and keep going for about 4 or 5 times. And each time, as I was editing in specific sections, it was like, oh, what about this? And so I had to go and fix that in there. So it took a while to write the first book because of that. But I am very happy with it. And it made me an award-winning author. So I guess others were happy with it too.
Well, just listening to you, you really made it your own. You gave a lot of thought to the characters. You made a conscious decision to do it very differently to other authors. So there was a huge thought process into that. And, one of the questions I often ask authors is, do you ever get stuck? Do you get stuck on words or on processes and stuff like that? But listening to you, you planned everything ahead of time. And so that wouldn't have happened to you because you had everything sketched out and you knew where you were going and what you wanted. And I keep hearing that you're not afraid of the editing process, that you love the editing process because you understand that with editing, and knowing Tammy, I now understand why she loved your work.
Thank you.
Because you're so good at editing yourself, even.
Mm-hmm. I could read back through Spellbound now and find more things I want to change, but I try not to, because if I do, then I get aggravated that the book's not the way it should be. So I stay away from it as much as possible. Now, when doing the second book, Enchanted, I had to go back through it, on certain things. And I'm currently working on the third book, Charmed. And because of certain things were brought up in the first book, I have to make sure that I keep all that separate so that I have it when I get to the third and the fourth book. I don't want to be repetitive about anything that I've said in the books, but at the same time, because it's a series, I have to tie it in some. And before Spellbound, I never would have dreamed of writing a series ever. And a friend of mine told me I needed to get a vampire book and read it. It was Twilight. And I read it and it was like, man, I could do this. I could write this. I know I could. And so when I started writing it, I used to write short stories about myself and my friends. And so one of them was called A Sprinkle of Magic. And it was the basis of the beginning of where Spellbound came from. I used it, and then, like I said, it was just a little bit thing for me and my friends. But the different parts and the different elements worked for Spellbound. And so I brought them over and used them for that. And since A Sprinkle of Magic was the name of the little short story, I'm going to have a shop in the third book, Charmed, and it's going to be called A Sprinkle of Magic. And it's going to be it's about cousins, the books are. And it's going to be one of the cousins' things that they do. They own this shop. So I could tie it all in together nicely, since I went from a little short story that was about 4, 5, maybe 17 pages of that to 175,000 words in Spellbound.
You are an extraordinary and exceptional author, and I can really see why Tammy likes your work. Can you talk a little bit more about how you develop such compelling and relatable characters?
Well, one of the things I did is I've named my characters after people that are around me. And so my lead character, Ashley, she is named after my goddaughter as her middle name. So I wanted her to be likable. I went to Victoria, that's her first name, and I asked her different things. When you were in school, did you do this? Did you do that? Because she's graduated a couple years back. But she was the one person I could go to and say, okay, you're at that age limit. What would you be doing at school if this is what you were doing? And she, in the language, a lot of the language, they have slang and stuff like that. So all that stuff I took into account. And then I went to my other goddaughter, who was 2 years younger, and I asked her. And she gave me the different, because they live in different counties and stuff. So they both gave me ideas for both sides of it. And then when I sat down and was actually writing it, I also was on Facebook, and I have a couple of friends out there who have teenage daughters. And I would run certain things by them and say, okay, does this make sense? Does this sound like it's an adult thing saying something? Does this sound like what children today will say? And I got feedback from everyone. And then when I sat down and began to write, that feedback was in my head. And when I would write something that seemed more mature than it should be for a young adult, I would go back and I'd take that out. And then I got to realizing, well, my main character says that she looks like she's 17. She's actually 170 in witch years. So she would be a little more mature. So certain words could be used still with her versus if it was just a young adult book.
Wow, that is amazing. So, it's research, and that's how you got so much relatability in terms of your characters. Now, one of your reviewers, Mark Townsend, talked about your amazing ability to avoid exposition while still immersing readers in your world. How do you strike that balance between revealing enough but still keeping the mystery alive?
Honestly, I didn't really think about it when I was writing it. As I was writing, I knew I wanted to make them have the 500-year span of their life, but I didn't really have that figured out to how each day that would be, how each year it would be, and what their life would be like. And so when I was telling everything and I didn't want to do it all at one time. I myself don't like to read books that start out telling you the entire background on everybody. I like to be slowly led into like you would get to know a friend. I wanted to get to know the characters that way. And so I tried to keep that going in my book. At the same time, it didn't feel right to say, here's how she does this, that, and the other, as just herself thinking it. But when she's sharing the story of her life with the boyfriend that she finally gets, it's better the way I did it was so that he was learning about her as reality. If you met someone new, this is how you'd learn about them. They wouldn't just sit down and go, okay, here's my story, and then spill it all to you. You'd learn over time. And so that's what I was trying to do with my book. I wanted it to be learn over time instead of it being just one pile dumped in the middle of it and here we go. And so when I go from book to book, I reiterate some of that stuff, but not completely come out and tell everything. So I actually had an editor. They're falling. I actually had an editor who told me that he liked the way that I was able to bring in the first book into the second book, certain details, without actually going through and saying, okay, here's what happened, and repeating what was in book one into book two. And so that actually stayed with me. And what Mark said too, it made me go. And that first time, you get the book out, and I was like, okay, few reviews from people that I know. And then out of the blue, I got Mark's. And when he was saying that about all that, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was doing that. Thanks for pointing it out. Because I've been writing since I was 13. But now I've never written anything quite like Spellbound as far as many pages and feeling so in my gut that this is the way it should be and that it was a good book. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have entered the contest if it just been something that I had seen on my own and pulled out one of my old stories. But I'd finished Spellbound the year before, and I really felt in my heart that this book was the book. And so I needed to take this book and run with it. But even feeling that way, when it came time when I saw the sponsored ad on Facebook, I still blew it off. I saw it 3 times before I finally entered, and I entered on the very last day. And then I forgot that I entered.
Wow, that is amazing. I'm just captivated by the story then while I'm listening to you and how you develop your characters. Now your main character, uh, Spellbound, adds a very intriguing dimension to the plot. How did you decide on this unique aspect of her character?
A lot of it I pulled from Victoria, my goddaughter that she's named after. A lot of it came from her, and then a lot of it came from me. Even though I have in my head this character as being my goddaughter, I'm also seeing my own characteristics going into how I do certain things. And so in even the non-main characters, the other characters, there's always something of myself that I have lived through, I have gone through, that I've been around for someone else to go through, all those different things. So I pull all that in and I'll put it into the book as if it was the character and not me. But I feel like that they always say, write what you know. And I feel like that was more of what I knew was certain things that happened. But when it came to the magical aspect of things and her powers and the reason why she has so many and everything, that came as I was writing. I don't really do an outline beforehand. I tried that and I never actually stick to it. I just, as I'm writing, my thoughts can just go somewhere else and I'll just be just frantically jotting it down. I always write out in longhand. I don't use a computer, which is a little more time consuming because then I have to type it up. But I lost a document on a computer once and I said it never happened again.
Oh my goodness. So you actually write it out longhand and then you retype it.
Mm-hmm. I actually I print out the book when I'm ready to go through it and make sure I've got all of the edits and stuff done. I'll print it out. So after I'm done with it, now I have a one-sided printed paper. So I just flip it over and that becomes my notepad for the next book instead of just throwing it away and making more waste.
Wow. Wow. I'm absolutely gobsmacked by your process. And, any new author can learn so much from you. Now you've received a lot of accolades for your technical ability, and I can understand that why. Readers praise your attention to detail. Can you share just a little bit more about your writing process and how you ensure that every little detail matters?
Well, surprisingly, when I read books, I actually hate a lot of detail. I prefer dialogue. So for mine to actually be that way is surprising for me. But I've found if I can I don't want it to be like, okay, he wore, whatever, green pants or whatever. And in fact, when I first began Spellbound, I sent it to a friend who was having a surgery. and she was going to be in the hospital for a few days. And I said, it's not finished, but if you want to read through and tell me what you think. She came back and said, what do they look like? What clothes are they wearing? Well, it never occurred to me that we needed to know, that kind of stuff. So at the same time, with details and reading myself, I don't want to have over a lot of details. And so I was trying to make it where I would explain why and what they wore without actually going into it. Like, she wore a lavender shirt today because it matched her eyes or something like that, as opposed to lavender shirt, blue jeans, and heels. So I tried to do that. But when it comes to the witches and their entire background and how things came to be and everything, I found I had to do a little more than I wanted to as far as the details went. And I'm very forgetful since I had COVID. The main thing that happened with me with it was that my short-term memory comes and goes. So I had to keep notes of everything that I've been doing and everything. And I keep them in a book with the family tree. As I write the different parts and these different people pop into the story, it's like, okay, well, this person belongs to this person who belonged to that person. So I have to keep a family tree of everything and who it is and what it is. And then I put it all in the book I always keep, but I put it all in the cookbook here that I've done. It's a cookbook on spells and uh, a companion saga to the series. And what you'll see as you go through it, yes, it does have some of the recipes and stuff, but it also has things like that would be in my notebook. Like, this is where I got the inspiration for Erica and Donnice. I met these two ladies, and they are such sweet ladies. And Erica, in the book, she has all these problems that she's had. A dog bit her, she was electrocuted, all this different stuff. She's surprisingly that she's alive actually happened to my friend Erica. And so I used her story as a basis for the Erica. And then I couldn't leave her mom out. So most of the people, in fact, everybody in the books are named after someone that I know, except for Stephanie. And she's named after Stephanie Meyer, Twilight's author, because it was because of Twilight that I went back to writing about witches and stuff. I've loved them since I was 15. That was the first time I read my vampire book, and I absolutely adored it. I loved it. And so it was the first one that, and I'll bet, 15 years old, you have more important things to do than sit down and write a book. And so it was not until I read Twilight again that vampire bug was bitten. And so I everything that I could think of, every little detail that can be put into the story without actually overshadowing the story, the dialogue, I try to get in there. I want people to be able to visualize where they are, but I don't want them to be like, oh, here we are again, when they're looking at specific spots, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does make sense. Your process is absolutely um, amazing. Now, from Spellbound to Always to Enchanted, you managed to somehow keep your readers hooked. Can you tell us a little bit about how you keep the momentum going from one book to the next? It's like your readers, you create this almost anticipation so people can't wait for the next installment, if you wish.
Well, I'm bad about leaving my books in a cliffhanger. So in Spellbound, without saying what happened, I left that in a big cliffhanger. And so when I went into Enchanted, I also, from where I end, I pick right back up. So it doesn't skip time or anything. It's right after what happened in Spellbound at the end. It was like 5 seconds later in Enchanted when it began. And the same with Enchanted. I left a cliffhanger there too. And when Charmed begins, it's right there at that. Where it's still that way. It's all one set of it's two over the course of 2 years. So it starts out and ends without any extra, time in between where we just jump forward. There is one spot in Charmed where it does jump forward 9 minutes, 9 months, but there's a reason for that. So it jumps forward, but some of the characters are not aware. And to me, a book is good, even if it's my own, if I'm excited to read it or write it. And when I started writing Charmed again the other day, because I've been doing a whole lot of other stuff and I haven't been writing as much, I felt that same exhilaration inside, that same, like I was jumping back into this atmosphere in this place with my friends, and it was finally something that needed to be done. And so I try to keep that in my work, so that if I'm anticipating it, if I'm enjoying it, then that whoever reads it is too. And even though it's like people keep telling me they don't understand how, but I wrote a sad ending in Spellbound. Something happens, and I wrote it, but I still cry when I read about it, which people don't seem to understand. But that was my character, and what happens, I felt that deeply because she was sort of like me. So I try to make sure that, if possible, I can keep all this stuff going on and everything up to date and everything. And I want it to be where it's not just me that enjoys it, but the readers also. And I think a lot of them have told me, especially with Charmed, I've had a couple of ladies who's been telling me monthly, "Are you done yet?" So I'm real anxious to get, Charmed done. And I'm so happy with working on it every night. I'll go to bed, and before I actually go to bed, I'll go sit down in the room and I'll just write.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. I'm so amazed at your process and your story and your character development, and just the whole way that you write your stories. And I just want to say hello to one of our viewers here, um, that says hi in the comments. And we're going to take a very quick break. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Introducing Books with Bridgetti, a lineup of industry experts, award-winning authors, and talented indie authors. Books with Bridgetti.
Welcome back. You're watching Books with Bridgetti, and my amazing guest today is Shannon Simpson. Shannon, your books are both described as heartwarming and heart-wrenching, which sounds like a contradiction. But how do you balance the emotional depth in your stories?
Almost as if it's myself living it. I'm really good at, when I have this scene written out, I will go back and I'll have the conversation of the scene in my head. And then if while I'm doing that, something feels forced, or it's not something I thought would actually show up in a two people conversation with someone really in reality, I'll go back and change that. I like to have it so that you can relate to my characters, but at the same time, you also will, you have a dislike for certain things that they do. And I want people to be, like, I'm team Ashley. Oh no, I'm team Misty or something, because Misty's the bad guy or the bad girl in the series. So I like the idea of it being like that, where people can relate to the characters. And I think that's one of the reasons that they feel it so deeply, is because they can relate to it. And I think that comes from my writing as a person who can jump myself into the book as if I was actually there, and sometimes as if I'm living it, or sometimes as if I'm living it as a friend of the main character. And I think that's what everybody sees with the books, is they feel the same thing. At the same time, I also want them to feel the heartache when, because everyone's had a heartbreak at some point in time. And I like the idea of them having a chance to, they get to the happy stuff and see the happy stuff, but I want them to feel the gut-wrenching pain as well when that happens. And then I want them to be happy again. I want them to be able to go from both sides. I want them to be happy, sad, but I want to leave on a happy note. And I think that's my main goal when I'm writing. Is I don't do it for money or anything like that. My goal in writing is to share my stories with people. there's been tons of books written that have, touched my life in some way. And I want my books to do the same for other people.
Now, I think it's every author's dream to have their book turned into a movie at some point. And I know some of your readers have said, they would love to see your work turned into a movie. Now, if that were to happen, who would you like to see cast in the main roles? Have you given that some thought?
Well, I actually, when I am writing, I pick out people to play in the roles. I'll pick out some actor, actress, and I'll go, okay, that's perfect for whichever character it is. With Ashley, I chose Ashley Green. She's the one that played Alice in Twilight. I could totally see her in that role, and I think she would do a really good job. And for Aiden, I was thinking Liam Hemsworth, because he's got that Australian accent. And so, which is why he has one. My mind was saying Liam Hemsworth would be perfect for the role. So that's the person that I chose to use as my basis for Aiden. From the way he looks, with the exception he has jet black hair and Liam Hemsworth doesn't. But other than that, it was him all the way. And that's one of the reasons why he's got the Australian accent and everything. So, like in the second book, Enchanted, for the guy that named Cable, who Stephanie likes, he came from, I like Theo James for it, the actor from Divergent. So when I was describing and what Cable looks like, that's who I had in my mind. I mean, I've done it for every little person, every little character. I try to go through and I'm like, okay, who would be best to play Mother? Who would be best to play, Renee, the different aunts and all that. And so I try to make sure that I stick with those people, but at the same time, it's supposed to be like he's like a 19-year-old, and Liam Hemsworth obviously is probably too old to play that role now. I wrote the book in 2013, so he's grown.
It's a while back.
Things like that. And I was like, well, there's always going to be new actors out there, and there's going to always be ones coming from Australia and stuff too. So at some point in time, I would be able to just, pick one out if it ever happens and give my 2 cents on what I think who would be good for the part, and hopefully they would go with that.
Now, apart from your amazing ability to describe your characters and to make them so relatable, you also create imagery that transports readers into your world. How do you go about creating such vivid scenes that people can transport themselves into?
Well, my main thing is I want you to be able to see where you are, but I also want you to forget where you are and just be living life, not focusing on it. So my main place is the Mystic Manor, is where the witches live. And I was thinking along the lines of my aunt's house that I used to clean when I was a teenager. I thought it was a perfect place to use. It was just exactly what I was looking for. So I used that as the house that I was going to write about. And then Enchanted Willows, which plays a big part of it too. That was something that I drew a little sketch back 14, 15 years of age of a little river. And on each side of it, it had wildflowers and willow trees. It was like a little haven. You could just go in there. You could barely see the sky because of the willow trees. And it was just this little peaceful, quiet place. And I drew that out and then forgot all about it too. But when I was looking to do something unusual for a place they could go where neither one of them had to worry about, attacking the other, I thought of that picture. And so I decided to make that Enchanted Willows. And then the more I wrote about it, the more I could see the little, something simple like the rocks underneath the water or a big boulder sitting beside it they could sit and talk on. So as I was writing the different scenes, it was like, okay, we need to add a little here to give a little more in depth of what I'm trying to say without saying, okay, they sat down on this big rock beside a creek and there was weeping willow trees. I try to make it sound more poetic, I guess is the word. And in doing so, I can almost see in my head, just transfer myself right there to Enchanted Willows or to Wisteria Manor. And then the schoolhouse, it's sad to say, the schoolhouse that I used was where my niece went to high school over in Greenville, and it looks like a prison from the outside, which is what I said about the book in the book about the school she was going to. And then my main goal is I want you to be able to admire and wish you were there for the scenery. You can't be, but to make it so you wish that I wish I could just jump into Spellbound and I could be right there in Enchanted Willows. I'd never have any issues, or I could go hang out at Mystic Manor with the ladies and the witches. Just, I want you to enjoy where you are, because to me, reading is an escape from reality. And so when I'm writing, that's my main thing. Where would I want to go if I could escape reality? And there's a lot of days I'd like to go to Enchanted Willows. And so I try to get that out there, and I hope that everybody else feels the same way.
Wow. What was the inspiration behind you venturing into young adult fiction with supernatural themes? Like, where did this idea come from?
Twilight. I used to work at a secondhand store, and every day we had books come in. Well, a very dear friend of mine told me one time that Twilight had been out. I'd seen the movie even. I had no idea there was a book. He said I should get the book and read it. The next day, a copy that had the movie poster on it came in. The entire 8 years that I worked there, that's the only time we got that specific copy of book. So I got it. He was right. I loved it. I read them all. And then I was trying to sleep one night, and I always run my plot lines through my head. And I remembered the Sprinkle of Magic story that I had done years ago. And I got thinking about, well, what if I took and I made it so it was from my short story to an actual book that talks about witches having these powers. Well, then it come down to what kind of powers. So everything that I did, I hate research, really hate to do research. But for books, I'm kind of stuck doing that. So I tried to make sure that wherever I was and whatever I was writing, and I'm bad about, since I write longhand, if I'm out in the car, I'll start typing in my notes and my notepad and my phone, because whenever an inspiration hits, I've got to go with it. Otherwise, because of my memory issues, I forget. So I try to pull you in, but also I want it to be hard for you to put the book down. So anything that I can do on my end to make that harder for the reader, I try to do. Yeah.
That, having interviewed hundreds of authors, that was the one thing that I've learned from talking to so many different authors, is that's always the goal, is that you want to captivate them so they can't wait to turn the page, literally. I think you have, you do that with your books.
Thank you.
So not just from one page to the other, but people can't wait for the next installment of the book. Now, you explore themes such as friendship, love, and self-discovery in your stories. How do these themes intertwine and evolve throughout the series?
Well, it just sort of happens, is the thing. When I'm writing, it's like with Stephanie. I had no intention of her. I can't say that either. That's a spoiler. Wait a sec. With Ashley, I wanted to be able to. This is the first book I've ever written in first person. Every book, even my little short stories, have always been in third. So when I started writing this in first person, I was trying to figure out how to. Everything had to come from Ashley, but how did I find out things from Stephanie? And so that's where the mind reading came in. But it was one of those things where I want the characters to be so well liked. I want specific characteristics are being done about even the teachers that I use in Spellbound. Those were my teachers. There was one, Miss Yinchko, who the first day of class, and I used this in the book, she said, if you see me doing like this on this specific eyebrow, I accidentally shaved it off when I was younger and it grew back the wrong way. So I'm always having to do this. So when I was sitting down to write this book, I'm like, I remember that about her. I've got to use that in the book. And then there's a part where David, one of the students, he brings a witch's broom in and gives it to the Spanish teacher. My dad actually did that. He took a witch's broom in and gave it to one of his teachers. And I was like, these are things that are funny. You should never do, obviously, but were funny. And so I tried to incorporate everything that I possibly could into Spellbound. But the problem is, everybody tells me Spellbound is so thick, I should have saved some of it to put over into Enchanted. But you see, I can't do that. If there's a story, I want the story to be told. I want it to be, and so Enchanted should have been thicker, but you can see that it was not. With Enchanted, that's the one that I wrote and then rewrote again because I wasn't happy with it. And so I tried my best the second time around I went from first person of Ashley each chapter to second, or the next first person would be Stephanie. So that way we got a little more, because this is Stephanie's book where she's fallen in love, Enchanted is. And I wanted to make sure that I gave her a chance to have her time, her thoughts and everything. But because I also wanted Ashley to know what was going on at the same time, I had to make a new power so that she could actually be within inside of Stephanie's head for a change. And it was never planned. That's what everybody always says. Oh, I write an outline, or I do, make little note cards. I tried that once. I never actually pulled the note cards out after I made them. I tried an outline of all 4 of the books that are going to be in this Spellbound saga. And I might start off right where I'm at, but by chapter 2, that there's no use to worry about that outline no more, because people always say the characters tell them what to do, and that's what happens in Spellbound, in the whole series. Even I'm being guided as I start to write. And one of the weird things, people think I'm weird because I can write, and I wrote Spellbound while I was sitting with my family watching TV, but I can also write and sing along to the radio at the same time. And it's just that my mind will work both ways. So I can, dead silence, I can't stand it. I'd rather hear nails on a chalkboard. But in order to do Spellbound, like I said, I watch television. Now doing the editing, that's different. I have to have all quiet for that. But I don't know, it's something that I can do. I can write and sing with the radio, which people don't. Why I don't write the words of the radio of the song. But I think that's one of the things that makes it so I'm easier to tell stories, is the fact that I can do all the different stuff at one time. I guess that makes sense.
Wow, it does. I mean, my next question to you was actually, beyond writing, do you have any other creative outlets, and how does it influence your storytelling?
I make things out of clay. I haven't done that in a while either, but I love to make little figures and stuff out of clay. I also do diamond paintings. When I need to just escape everything, I'll take out a diamond painting and do it. I read. I love to read. And so that's one of the things that makes it great working for WMP as well, is the fact that I get to read all these books and I get to see and help other authors. So my main thing is, I don't ever get writer's block. I just get I'm not going to work on it block, because I've always got ideas in my head. I've got probably 2,000 different ideas jotted down to do romance. I want to do a legal thriller kind of series. All these different things I've got plans for. And I've got a bunch of children's books I'm working on too. And so it's one of those things where I have all this stuff to do and no time to do it. Because I'm always wanting, when I have downtime, it usually means that I went somewhere and came back, because I don't like to be idle. I want to do something the entire time. So if I'm watching TV, I'm working on work, or I'm working on the computer about something. Even if it's typing up what I've been writing, I'm always doing something, because if I'm not, I feel like I'm wasting time. And I hate that. It's like if I go shopping with my sister, she wants me to go into the store. I don't want to go in. I'll sit in the car. So the first thing I'll do is go, okay, I was right around this, getting my head to where I was exactly, or close to it in Charmed. And then I'll start going through and I'll just type it out in my notepad on my phone, so that I just have to take that, copy it, send it over to my computer, and I'll have all that right there to edit. And I just feel like if I can do that instead, I just don't like to be idle. That's the main thing. I don't like to be idle because there's never enough time, and so I like to use all the time that I have.
That is absolutely amazing. You know, now your readers can't wait for the next installment. Um, are you willing to give us any little hints about what's in store for your future characters?
Um, in Charmed, I realized that, like I said, I've never done a series before, and so I was keeping all that stuff in my notebook, but even in my notebook, I screwed up a year. And so I realized it between Enchanted and starting Charmed. So I have to find a way to fix that because you can't go back and change the first book. So in Charmed, without telling you exactly what it is, she realizes something has happened, and Ashley does. And she has to figure out how to go about fixing it without reliving it, because she can turn back time, she can do all this different stuff with her powers. So she has to figure out how to do that. Erica ends up learning that she has two babies instead of one on the way. And Aiden turns out to have a new power that nobody knew about. I think that none of that should give anything away. So I think that'll work.
Awesome. Can I ask you to just hold up the book covers? And can you tell me, did you have any creative input
Well,
when it came to deciding on your covers?
the cover was part of the thing with Tammy, with the contest. And so I gave her, I wanted to do, there's a medallion that Aiden wears. And what it is of, without coming out and telling anybody, is very significant to the final book. So I wanted to do that, but then Tammy had this part done. And I'm so glad I listened to her because this looks so much better than the simpleness that I was going to go with. So I approved it. And if you can't really see it really well, but there's a little glare of like yellow right there. And I take that to be as like part of what's coming as far as the medallion coming into play and everything. And the way that the Spellbound has been done with it, I just love it. And you can, if you look really close back here behind the wording, this is Enchanted Willows. And that's what I'm planning to put on book 3 is Enchanted Willows. And then Enchanted, we put Stephanie in a swing on the porch. And then right over here is Netter, Ashley's familiar, which was named after my dog. And then this one is the cookbook and the companion. And so I love the fact that they're very bright colored. They're very eye-catching. And there's just something about Ashley here that makes me feel like she is sweet. But if you look close around her eyes, I think she could be a really mean person if she needed to be a bad witch, which I don't think I'm going to have happen, but who knows? You know how it is. The book might change up.
Yeah, I was looking at the covers, and as you said, there's a lot of detail in the imagery on the book. If you look very closely, you can see there's a lot of finer detail in there. You can see a lot of attention was paid to the detail in the actual image. So well done on that. Was there any thought process between the choice of colors of the books
No,
in particular, or was that not of much significance?
I don't know that it was a specific thing that she was aiming for, but I do like the fact that it's got the greens in it and everything. And it's kind of dark, but it's also not as dark as it could be. I didn't want it to be, something that was just scary or anything. And the same thing goes with this one. See, the colors still go with Enchanted. We still got the greens and stuff. This one's just, because it's not technically part of the series. It's brighter. But the main goal was just to stick with the two, like these two. And then I'm hoping the third will have a little bit of color because it's going to be Enchanted Willows on the cover, but not overly. I don't want it to overshadow these. So I'd still go with the greens and the blacks and make sure that all that kind of mixes in still. because I really want them all to match when they're out, so that they look like they're supposed to be together.
Yeah, so it's
And
part of a
some
set.
don't do that. I just can't stand when it looks like that.
Oh my goodness. Shannon, this was so much fun. Thank you so, so much for being a guest on the show. And we'd love to have you back again when your next book is out. So thank you very much. And I want to say a huge big thank you to the audience for joining us. You were watching Books with Bridgetti. And so please join us again on the next episode. We can't wait to talk to you again soon. Shannon, stay well. And we look forward to the next time we have you on the show again.
Great.
Thank you for joining us on Books with Bridgetti. Join us next time for industry experts and award-winning authors.
I think this might be, I've been on over 24 different podcasts and radio shows in the last couple of months. And this has to be one of the most sophisticated, what the kids I used to teach called bomb.com shows and presentations that I've ever been on. It's fantastic. Thank you for having me here.
Available wherever great books are sold near you.